Hey everybody, Jay Glazer bringing you another episode of Guidance by Glazer. We are at the beginning of Memorial Day weekend, so I want to take this time to wish you a wonderful weekend indeed, a long holiday weekend. I know I'll be taking some much needed rest in my upstate retreat with some friends and coworkers, and I hope you are doing something very similar this wonderful weekend. Hopefully we get some sun and we get to spend some time outside and enjoy each other's companies. I am looking forward to it. But before we break for the week, I want to share with you some guidance by Glazer. So today, a topic that's on my mind is how long it takes to buy a property. That is a question we get asked by every customer with whom we are working on the buy side, and one that I want to shed some knowledge on with you here today. So I think there's really kind of four main topics, if you will, for how long it takes to buy a property. Four things you really need to consider and factor in the buying process to better identify and understand just how long the process is going to take. So I'm going to give you those four topics, and we'll talk about each of them and the effect of each of them as it relates to the said timeline of buying a home. So the first most important factor is, are you buying a cooperative or are you buying a condominium? Now, if you're buying a cooperative, the reality is you are subject, as many of you know, to an independent board review process that can be very timely and time-consuming. So, for starters, when you buy in a co-op, you have to put together what's called the co-op purchase application, and said application really is lengthy. It usually takes our clients between 30 to 40 days, and that then gets sent to the property manager, and the property manager then sits on it from anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks, and then it gets sent to the board, and the board sits on it for another 1 to 2 weeks, potentially even longer, and then calls you in for an interview. So what we say in a cooperative purchase process is it could take anywhere from really 60-ish to 120 days. More than likely, it will take more than 75 days to close on a cooperative apartment. Having said that, if you are buying a condominium, you have similar steps that you have to get through. You have to put together paperwork, you have to wait for the property manager to review the paperwork. But what we experience typically is that all of those little steps are just made quicker. They happen faster. The condo board doesn't have the legal right to say no to you, therefore they don't really review the package with as much scrutiny, and they just issue the waiver of the right of first refusal, which is the fancy way of saying their approval, and all of a sudden you are approved and you can close on the home. So we typically find that a condominium process could take, depending on the next component, which is financing versus cash, anywhere from 30 to 90 days. So the timeline usually doesn't take as long because that approval process is just slimmed down a little bit. It's a little leaner and therefore a faster process. So on to my second topic, which I just mentioned, is are you paying cash for the home or are you financing? So in the fastest scenario we can think of in the condo versus co-op situation, obviously townhouses are a separate entity we won't get into today. If you are paying cash for a home and you're buying a condo and the home is ready to be closed on, meaning the seller has moved out, the reality is you could feasibly close in 30 days. Now, it's very unlikely. There have to be a lot of moving pieces that are succinct and moving along well. But the reality is 30 to 45 days is realistic in a cash purchase. Now, more realistic is 45 to 6 days in a cash purchase. And again, if you're buying a condominium, 60 to 90 days with financing. Again, financing takes time. So there's one thing that's really out of everybody's control, and that's the process the bank has to go through to essentially get the financing in place. That is not a quick process, and despite the fact that banks can issue what's called a commitment letter in a fairly timely fashion, the reality is it's conditional, and we want to issue a clean commitment letter without said conditions in order to ensure our financing is as ready to go as possible. So if you are buying cash, of course, as they say, cash is king, but it also can be an expedited process. Now, if you are financing and you are buying a co-op, that is essentially, in our world of timelines, probably the longest process we have. And in reality, I would say about 60% of the Glazer team business is in the cooperative marketplace with financing. So it's something we are very, very accustomed to dealing with. And the reality is that is a 90 to 120 day process. It can be frustrating, it can be long, it can be arduous, it can be hair raising and hair pulling, but the reality is that is typically how long the process takes. There are a lot of outside influences, the co-op board, the financing, the paperwork, all of those things have to be put together and have to be streamlined, and you end up typically in a 90 to 100 day pattern. Now, this is not a hard and fast rule. We have seen co-op closings with financing that have closed in 60 days. Do they happen very often? No. But every once in a while, we get surprised with how quickly the property manager reviews the application, how quickly the financing comes together, how quickly the board sets up an interview, and all of a sudden, we've closed in 60 days. Those are situations that are unique, but they do exist. So when you really want to understand the timeline in the beginning of your search process, identify where you're skewing. Are you skewing towards a co-op, or are you skewing towards a condo? Are you financing, or are you cash? Those are two very easy to understand and very easy to determine components that will equate to a certain amount of time in the buying process. The third point is a little bit trickier, and I have a good way to kind of make an assessment of how it works. So the third point is, how long does it take you as the looker, as the buyer, to identify a home you want to buy? That is the million-dollar question. We cannot tell our customers how long it's going to take to buy a home if we don't know how long they are going to take to buy a home. Meaning, are you the type of customer who walks into one home and says, I love it, and then walks into the next home and you say, I love it, and then you walk into the next home and I love it, and so forth and so on? Or do you walk into 50 homes and hate them all and then start circling back to some of the ones you had seen in the beginning, realizing maybe they weren't so bad as you thought? We don't know what kind of customer you are yet, so when we first meet, we can't possibly identify how long that search and looking process will take. Sometimes it could take a week, sometimes it could take a year. We have some clients, and maybe you're watching, who take over a year to buy a home. Now, that's what their process looks like, and that's their reality, and so it goes. But we really can't tell you what kind of customer you're going to be until we get into the ebb and flow of how you interact with homes. So my cheat, if you will, my way of kind of having you do a self-assessment of how long it's going to take to search is, when you rented an apartment in New York City, say you first moved here, or say you've just rented a home in the past, did you look at 3 rentals? Did you look at 10 rentals? Did you look at 15 rentals? Were you the kind of person who had to see every single rental on the market in order to feel like you were making the right choice? So do a little self-reflection on how long it took you to rent your last home, and then you might get a better idea of how long it's going to take you to find a home that you're going to buy. Because if you were a really slow looker for rent, now you're spending real money buying, you're putting down payment, you're putting down cash, and you're really in it to win it. So you're probably going to be even more deliberate and even more methodical and careful than you were in the rental market. Therefore, it's probably going to take even longer. And then the last point when it comes to how long it takes to buy a property is, what are you logistically available to see? How much time can you, as the buyer, commit to the buying process? We have some buyers who go rogue on us for weeks on end, and that pushes out their process. Again, no judgment, totally fine. We will work with whatever limitations or opportunities a buyer has to purchase a home. But if you are the type of person who can only look once every 2 weeks, or you're traveling for work all the time, or you need your spouse to see it, and your mom to see it, and your dog to see it, and you need everybody in your sphere of influence to see the home before you pull the trigger, the overwhelming likelihood is that process is going to take a little bit longer than the single person who walks into a home, knows what they want, when they want it, doesn't need anybody else to approve it, and can make an offer potentially within a short time frame and move forward on that home. So it's really about how much time can you commit to the buying process, and if you can't commit a lot of time, of course it's going to take longer. And if you commit every day and you're really committed and you're available Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then realistically you're going to see more product, you're going to see more homes, you're going to get into more places, you're going to get into the swing of things more quicklier, and it's going to take a shorter time frame. So again, all of those are influencing factors on the timeline of the buying process, and all things you should consider when you buy a home, but we can't really give you a very finite specific timeline. So you can work with the condo or co-op component, you can work with the financing versus cash component, but when you get down to these last 2 points, you really have to look at yourself and say, okay, how do I categorize here? Am I available? Am I not available? Am I picky? Am I not picky? So that's really our topic for today, the timeline of buying a property in New York City. And then, because we're talking about how long it takes to buy a home, next week, did you guess it? Can you guess it? You guessed it. We're going to talk about how long it takes to sell a home. Woo! Exciting stuff, everybody. So thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your time. We hope you got a lot of value out of this. If you did, please drop some comments. Feel free to share the video. Feel free to follow us on any one of our social media hubs. We have so many. We are so accessible. As I said to start the video, have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. We'll see you next week. Take care.